You have to be able to be a servant to be a leader.
Yeah.
And if you can't serve and you can't do the little things, then you're not in a position where you can have that responsibility.
I always make the upperclassmen serve. I think that's a much better way to do it, to foster culture.
You're listening to Lives that Speak, a podcast highlighting the remarkable work of Sidwell Friends School alumni. I'm Bryan Garman, head of school at Sidwell Friends, a pre-K through 12th grade independent Quaker school located in Washington, D.C. In this interview, I had the opportunity to sit down with two of our alumni coaches, boys head basketball coach Eric Singletary, class of 1993, and head tennis coach Logan West, class of 2001. Both were multisport athletes during their time at Sidwell Friends. Eric and Logan took similar winding roads back to their alma mater. After enjoying successful collegiate athletic careers and having short stints in the legal field, they returned to Sidwell Friends and discovered their passion for coaching. Building programs that have accumulated multiple conference and state championships, Eric and Logan have helped students succeed both on and off the courts. In this interview, we discussed Eric and Logan's time as students and coaches. We explored the importance of savoring the moment and building a culture centered on gratefulness, resilience, service, and community. So I am very happy to be here today with Logan West and Eric Singletary, two of the very finest coaches that I've ever met, and two terrific human beings who are alumni of Sidwell Friends School. So thanks for making time to be with us today.
Our pleasure. For having us.
Yeah, no, it took us a while to get here, but I'm glad we finally persevered and made it. And
quicker process.
That's exactly that's exactly right. So, I really have great admiration for both of you in how you coach, how you lead your teams, the culture that you set for your teams. But let's start, if we might, thinking about your journey as it relates to the time you spent at Sidwell Friends and athletics at Sidwell Friends and the particular connection of the Sidwell culture and the academic culture of Sidwell as it relates to athletics, right? Because the two of you have been you were very good at integrating that in your personal lives. And you also do an excellent job of that in your coaching life. So take us back to what you got out of your Sidwell Friends experience and how the athletic program contributed to that and how that experience manifests itself in your work.
Sure. I can start with that. Well, as you know, since you taught me American history many moons ago.
Very good student.
The athletics and academics at Sidwell really, challenges you and really teaches you a lot of time management skills. I thought that Sidwell prepared me very well to go on to play college tennis at Dartmouth and to be a student athlete in that setting. And I think that the coaches and mentors that we had here, and obviously I had Bill Budke and Lou Heber, who
you wrestled also.
I wrestled for Lou, yes. And I think that getting in the room taught me a lot of grit. And didn't just prepare me physically, but mentally, that if I could handle getting out there on the mat and challenging myself in that fashion, the tennis match was going to be easy.
Yeah.
And I think that having that confidence and that presence when you walk on the court, knowing that I've been through the fire, and I believe that I've been through more than my opponent, and I'm ready to outlast them and do whatever it takes out here.
So kind of resilience and determination.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you don't get that on the wrestling mat and a tennis court, where are you going to get it? Those are intensely individual sports.
Yes.
There's nowhere else to point.
Yes,
right?
It's all on you.
Yeah. And so there's a kind of mental preparation that you get through that process as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, Eric, how about you? And now the other thing, and just as you mentioned that, Logan, like you were both multi-sport athletes here,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And so you might want to incorporate that into the answer too. But Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, similarly to Logan, I think for me, even more so though, as a new student coming into the community.
And when did you come in?
Ninth grade.
Ninth grade. And when did you arrive?
In fifth.
You were fifth. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's a whole different challenge in itself.
Yeah.
Growing up here in native Washingtonian, but growing up in a very, what they call the hood now. I don't like to say that, but I grew up in a tough neighborhood. Coming here, as a new student, I always tell this story when I first came. They introduce you as a student to your class, And I told this kid a ton of stuff about myself, and he goes, "Everybody, this is Eric Singletary. He plays basketball, and he's from Southeast." And so I remember that being my first introduction to the community. So as it relates to your question, like I think sports was tremendous for me to be able to kind of get a peer group right away as I'm trying to transition into a brand new community academically, socially. There were so many different, I wouldn't call them obstacles, they were opportunities, but they were new. So I think playing sports and then being as a talented athlete in basketball, baseball, football, I think it immediately allowed me to be friends with older guys who could show me the ropes of school. That was more important than actually the sport. The sport was kind of a place of refuge. I always say that school here at Sidwell taught me that I was truly tougher than I thought I was to get through some of those challenges that I had academically. So once I was able to master that, like Logan said, time management, self-advocacy, I think that's one of the things that boys in general struggle with, and I think Black boys in particular struggle even more to ask for help. So I think once I kind of ascertained those skills, I was able to maneuver in Sidwell in a very positive way. But I wouldn't have been able to do that, I don't think, if I didn't have the sense of belonging through sports.
Yeah. And then you went to Rice, right, and played basketball there afterwards. Were you recruited also for baseball? Am I remembering that?
Yes.
Right. So, and tell us about your experience at Rice and how that shaped the way you coach and how you thought about your return to Sidwell through that.
Yeah, Rice was very similar to Sidwell in a way, right? I mean, it's a beautiful campus. Obviously, going all the way to Texas, I was able to go with a good friend of mine who was like my brother, Ian Graham, family I used to live with when I was here at Sidwell, so that gave it some comfort as well. But had a tremendous coach, Willis Wilson, who's also a native DMV, who also attended Rice. And so it was I couldn't ask for a better mentor to kind of help me navigate that space. But as it relates to Sidwell, I was completely prepared. As you know, Rice is a top-notch school, but I always say that was easier than Sidwell. And I certainly had to work hard there, but I was prepared to do it. So I think my experience there totally, was manifested by all the challenges and obstacles that I overcame here when I was in Sidwell.
To echo that, I always like to tell the students that I thought the transition from 8th to 9th grade at Sidwell was harder than the transition from Sidwell to Dartmouth.
I'm not sure that that's good or not. but I've heard stories like that before. And so, so take us, if you would, and I'll ask both of you this question, but let's start with you, Eric. So your journey from Rice, then back to Sidwell Friends, what did that look like? How did you end up coming back here?
Oh, man, it was through those years. Everybody, when you're a young athlete, you want to be a pro. And so I was fortunate enough to play a little bit of professional basketball in Europe and in Portugal and Germany for a couple of years, and still trying to find myself. And I was like, even though I went to Sidwell, had a tremendous education here, tremendous education at Rice, that caveat and that nugget, trying to hold on to, your sports life was challenging. And before I even got into coaching, I was considering doing a nonprofit that would help athletes adjust to transitioning into normal life, so to speak, because I think a lot of guys struggle with that transition. So I think for me, when I came back to D.C., I originally worked at a law firm because I was like, all right, I got to do something that makes sense. That I went to Sidwell and I went to Rice and always had coaching in my blood. I always loved the sport. But I just didn't think I could be a coach and justify the two institutions that I went to academically. But I think once I let that go and started getting into coaching more at the youth level, I've been incredibly happy and it's been fulfilling. I found my life purpose.
And so where did you, there's no doubt about that. Where did you start coaching?
Little League. Coaching youth rec league basketball, 8-year-olds, so I kind of, a lot of people don't know that. I kind of cut my teeth from dealing with the small kids and, the amount of teaching that goes into that. And I kind of took that group all the way up to 13, 14 years old. And then I was able to, Gonzaga noticed how well I was doing. And my first coaching job was assistant coach at Gonzaga, which only lasted a year. And I remember when Sidwell called me and kind of offered me the job, I wasn't going to take it because I didn't think I was ready. And I remember a mentor of mine saying, "You're never ready until you start." Yeah,
there's some truth to that. Yeah. Logan, how about you? As you graduate from Dartmouth.
Yes.
And then there's a legal career in there for you.
Yes, I took a little bit of a winding path back here, but I graduated from Dartmouth and went to law school. I actually went to night school. I was working as a paralegal during the day at a firm.
And you did law school. Was it GW?
I did my first year at Fordham.
Okay.
And I was working at a firm in Midtown, and then I came back to their DC office, and I finished up at GW.
Okay.
And practiced for a couple years, and my first coaching job was as an assistant here, and helping out with the varsity team, and just realized how rewarding it was. I actually started doing it when Bill Budke called me up and said, "Hey, do
The
you
legendary Bill Budke.
Yes." And Bill called and said, "Hey, can you come out and hit with some of our singles players, this spring?" And I said, "Sure, this will be, a lot of fun, great workout, get some exercise." And I started working with them and realizing how they just soaked up everything that you told them, and just the reason that we do this, right? I found my purpose and my passion with making a difference and getting those student athletes to become more self-confident, to develop that grit, and to really be able to have an impact. And I think at the middle and high school level, where we have the opportunity to coach, is really some of those formative years where you can make a huge difference in taking a student who might not be confident in their skills, but you see something in them and showing them, what they're capable of if they put in the hard work.
Our kids are great, right? I know. I taught you, right?
Yes.
And I know you now. So our alumni are amazing. Teaching students at Sidwell Friends is one of the most favorite things I've ever done. I mean, it may have been my most favorite professional activity, actually. What is it about our kids, do you think, that is a defining characteristic of them? How do you describe our kids, and what makes them so much fun to work with?
I think there's just an excitement and a joy that they come to the courts with. And I think E touched on it with when he talked about sports being a refuge. I always thought of the tennis court as my sanctuary. Mm. So no matter how much work I had, tests I had coming up or anything that was going on in my personal life, I always felt like when I walked onto the court, all of that melted away. And I had 1 hour, hour and a half, 2 hours to just enjoy hitting tennis balls. Yeah. And I think that the kids, when they come to the tennis court or the basketball court or into the wrestling room, you see that exuberance and that joy to compete, to learn. A lot of them come out with, there's a concept of that I read about called the beginner's creed, where which I think as adults we lose a lot, but the kids still have it. Yeah. Where you embrace the wonder and the joy of learning something new. Yeah. Whereas
the beginner's mind.
Yes. Yeah. Whereas we are, the older we get, the more we are afraid of trying that because we're expected to know it. And if we make a mistake, then we're going to be judged. Whereas a lot of these kids will just jump in and do it. So I think
Buddhist concept, right? Yes. The beginner's mind is where, right, it's fresh, it's new, it's open to possibility, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the openness, I think the ability to transform the information that we give. I think given the brightness and the curiosity of our students and how they're challenged academically, I think the community that they come from, even though we're an extremely diverse community, I think that's our strength. I think that plays out on the courts and the fields. I think the kids' ability to do everything. I'm always amazed that Logan and I talk about it all the time. I'm like, did we go to school here? I look at these kids in wonderment and how are they so good? How are they so able to do so many things? Play on a sport, be in the play, play an instrument, do well in school, community service, Quaker process, be involved in different political movements or whatever they're doing, they just do it all. So I'm always thinking that's the uniqueness of our school. And I'm always celebrating that we're at a small, private, independent school that's, with the strongest admission process, all these things that you would think would speak against us being real highly competitive. And so that's credit to the kids. I mean, obviously I think that we have some wonderful coaches here, wonderful teachers, but at the end of the day, the heartbeat of the school is driven through the students' ability to do it all. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing. It is the talent and the courage to try things, right? To try something new, to be open, and be a beginner, and not be intimidated by that is something that's special about our kids, I think. I want to get into the thing that does help our kids a lot, the great coaches that we have, but I want to just a little bit, pause for a minute and think about who were your heroes, right? I mean, you mentioned some of the coaches you had here, and if it's a local hero, that's great. We'd love to hear about that. If there are other folks that have had a big influence on the way you think about your craft and how you interact with kids, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
For me, it's my dad.
Yeah.
My dad was not a competitive tennis player, but he got me out on the court and, taught me off the TV and, would play with me, until I had blisters on my hands. And my mom would get mad at him for it. But some of, my best childhood memories are going to the public courts, near our house and just playing all day with my dad.
Yeah.
And, he did a lot to give me the opportunity to come here to Sidwell to get quality coaching, which allowed me to learn the game properly from an expert, and then to be able to play it at a high level.
Yeah.
I'd say my dad was probably my biggest hero.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yeah.
But you, E?
Man, that's a loaded.
You can have more than one.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I honestly, as I reflect, there's so many people that have stepped in the gap for me over the course of my life that as far as coaches and mentors and neighborhood activists. I mean, it started with Calvin Woodland back in my neighborhood, giving a boy like me, that's surrounded by so much, I would say, good things as well, but certainly, like I said, a very tough, impoverished neighborhood, but giving me hope that I could be the person that I became, through sports, through social activism, watching him give back to the community, who then introduced me to George Kettle, who started I Have a Dream program, who introduced me to Sidwell Friends. I knew nothing about the school before, he came into my life through Calvin. So it was just kind of like these vessels that were connected ended up being obviously I've had some great coaches. Dickie Wells at Kelly Miller Junior High School when I was there, one of the legendary coaches who graduated from AU, Hall of Famer. George Leftwich when I was here.
George, yeah.
Jeff Gold, Coach
sure.
Gold's like a second dad to me. Like all the tough times that I had here at Sidwell, those were those private moments that I would have in his office in tears. He always kept me focused and encouraged. So I always want to give him a huge shout out for what he's been and what he still is, in my life. But yeah, I've had so many. I think about that. It's almost like it was meant to be. Obviously, I had to make a lot of choices to do the work. But I certainly had so many people who were championing my cause since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I got to talk about Coach Gold as well. He was
who's still at the lower school,
yes.
right?
Yes. Coach Gold was, I think he touched so many student athletes who came through here. When I came in fifth grade, my footwork on the tennis court was probably my biggest weakness. And Coach Gold, likes to joke that I couldn't walk and chew bubble gum back then. But he, kept working with me to become, faster and quicker and stronger and put me in the weight room and got me on the track. Yeah. And I think that made a huge impact. There's all these, that's what you talked about, multi-sport athletes. Yeah. I think it's huge that along the way, yes, you need the specialized training if you want to be able to play at a high level, but you also need that that off court and that cross training to develop all of the skill sets that you need. And, whether that was in the wrestling room, with Coach Lou Heber, or on the track, with Coach Gold, those, I think played, equally big parts in my development as a player as my work with, Bill Budke on the tennis court. And then, outside of school, my private coaches, Mitch White, Jack Shore, who really worked to help get me to that next level.
I'd be remiss to. It's one person I always think about who probably doesn't get enough credit for the young man that I was and became, and it was through a lot of toughness and pain, and I didn't like it. But Ellie Carpenter.
Oh, Ellie,
was when I look back to what she did for me and what she was able to. I can't even describe her fight for me, how hard she was on me, and what that must have meant to her. Not be beyond the scope of what her job may have been. That investment that she put into me, I'd be remiss to not talk about how much she made me believe, how much I had to be accountable,
Yeah.
how tough she was. And,
Yeah.
I love her for that.
Yeah, I loved Ellie too. She reminded me of my grandmother. She was the assistant principal of the upper school.
Yeah.
And so she had that kind of way of taking care of people, but also holding them accountable.
Yes, very much so. Many meetings. Many meetings.
Yes. Yeah, Ellie was a very special person. The question of the multi-sport athlete is an interesting one because you both now coach sports where it's hard to get many students to play outside of your sports. What do we do about that? What's the cause of that? Is it a good thing? Is it something we should worry about? What do you think about it just in the sense of specialization in youth athletics in general?
We should definitely worry about it because I think the science is there, as far as the overuse injuries. And like Logan said, I think learning different skills in different sports. And one of the other things I think is important is being on another sport, learning how to give when maybe you're not the best player on that team. I think that gives you a sense of, say you're the best player on a basketball team, but then you may not be the best player. You may be a guy that is a reserve, like in another sport.
Right.
I think that teaches you some value that I think gets lost when you're totally just completely centered on one thing. I think that it's like one of those, I always say you have to be committed to something to get it, but you can grab it so hard that it can slip through your hands as well. So I think the detachment that we don't have when we specialize, I think it's dangerous to specialize, honestly.
Yeah. Logan, you have any thoughts?
I think that tennis probably is the sport where people specialize the earliest.
Yeah.
And there's fewer of those, student athletes that are playing tennis in another sport. We have, some of them, actually right now, one of our captains, Rowan Drant, is also a captain on the football team.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And we actually had one of E's legendary players, Dean Maslish, who hit the buzzer beater in the state championship game, the first one that we won.
Yes.
Was a captain on the basketball team as well as a captain on the tennis team.
Yeah.
So you do see it. And we've had a couple of players, Misha Ovcharenko and Danny Lier, have gotten in the wrestling room.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think that played a part in getting them to get in there and try it out. And
so you both coach Dean.
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to do this, but let's go here now. The state championship moment, one of the great moments in Sidwell Friends history when you won your first championship.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask this question because it speaks to the kind of people you both are. You both have a kind of inner calmness about you. You both have an ability to focus. You're both very intentional and cerebral in the way you approach your job, in the way you approach your relationships with kids. Mm-hmm. I have told this story before about the amazing work I think you did in that first state championship game, which could have devolved into chaos.
Yes.
Right. So let's see if I can get this right. It was Woodrow Wilson then.
Yep.
They go up by 2.
Mm-hmm.
We get the ball, bring it right back down court, and hit a 3-pointer.
Yes.
It gets waved off.
Jack Lewis.
Because they've called timeout.
Right.
Right? There's chaos arguing about whether or not they called the timeout in time, right? Their coach is all over the place, running all around. The Wilson players are running all around. We have assistant coaches out there arguing our case, but you are not arguing the case. You're with the kids. Can you just take us through what you're trying to do in that moment? Because that I found was a moment of profound centering for our kids that put them in a position for what happened next.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you have an amazing memory, Brian. You play by play. But I just, in that moment, I'm always speaking about poise, and I'm always talking about moving on to the next play. And even in a huge moment like that, where you can easily feel justified and feel like a victim, like I'm big on we're not going to be victims. We're going to assess the situation, We're going to approach it. We've trained for this. Every moment we feel like we try to train for. And certainly you can't prepare for feeling like you've been victimized and robbed in a situation. But I thought it was my duty in that moment to get us, it's a good word, centered back to the opportunity that we still had. I wasn't going to let them believe that the game was over. I couldn't predict that Dean would make that shot.
Right.
But I just knew that if I didn't draw up something, I didn't give the centering, as you said, if I didn't do that, then nothing that couldn't possibly happen.
Right.
Because we'd have just stayed in that moment of feeling like the referees took the game from us.
Yeah. So there was it felt like, to me, in a way, a kind of Quaker moment, in the sense where it was, right, we got to bring together, like, all right, this has happened.
Right.
This may or may not be fair, but this is where we are. And we're going to embrace what we have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just told him I loved him. I told him that I still believe that we can win this game.
Yeah.
Drew up a play, a couple of options if this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because the play was originally drawn up to go to Jack. And then Dean, but Dean made a play. And and all credit to him, but like you said, that's where it comes back to, what Brian's describing is the profound intentional relationships. I think about some of the tough conversations that I've had with Dean over the time, and he was a strong-headed kid, and I tell him I love him for it because he just wasn't one of these kids that just nodded at you all the time. Like, you need kids to be. He was just as passionate about winning as a coach, and so I couldn't think of a better person to live that moment as a lifer. When a Jason Gibson, great player, fouls out the game.
Right.
And then, one of our lifers makes that play. So that speaks. That was a storybook moment for
it was a storybook moment. Yeah. And so we're talking about, just so we're all clear, Dean Maslich, who was a tennis player and basketball player, a two-sport athlete at Sidwell Friends. Yeah, great. Now, this all comes to this point about culture. And Logan, I've heard you speak about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The culture matters, right? We know this.
Yes.
And there's this great phrase, even in the corporate world, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? If you have the right culture, you can accomplish all kinds of things. So let's start with you, Logan, on this. How do you build culture? What does that look like? And how important is that to the success that you've had?
Like you said, I think culture is probably the single most important thing in the success of our programs, and nothing else will be possible without a strong foundation of culture. To speak to my sport, like we've talked about it, an individual sport, players are used to going to USTA tournaments, being on an island. Yeah. It's all about them. They have their own individual rankings, might have aspirations of playing in college. It's important for us to create an environment where they buy into a team first culture, where it doesn't matter if you're playing number 1 singles or number 3 doubles. Each one of those matches counts the same to the team outcome. And that we're all going to go out, we're going to compete, we're going to push each other as hard as we can in practice, because iron sharpens iron, and the more we can get quality reps and push each other to be better, those rising tides are going to raise all ships. But at the end of the day, you want to have that environment where the students feel like they're part of a family.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that it takes time to build.
Yeah.
And when you start doing it, it's hard because you run up against some of that resistance, the way things might have been previously, or, people's own individual, thoughts or goals.
Yeah.
But once you get that, and it took me a couple years, with our programs to get to that point, but I think probably one of the proudest moments I've had, beyond winning banners or, national rankings for our programs or players that have gone on to college, was in, I think it was my second year, at the end of the year, with our girls team, which is a team that went 500.
Yeah.
And we were fighting to stay in the upper division of the ISL.
Yeah.
And we had a group of girls. We had just lost a tough match against Flint Hill to be eliminated in the ISL tournament. And we sat down, in a circle together after the match to debrief. And we had several seniors. This was their last high school tennis match. And a lot of girls were in tears, but every one of them talked about what they were going to remember about Sidwell tennis and how this team felt like a family. And that meant more to me than anything else, because it meant that they had gotten a tremendous experience and they had built relationships with their teammates that were going to last beyond their time on the courts and beyond their time at Sidwell. And I think that's what it's all about, is we're yes, we're coaches and we teach the fundamentals and the X's and O's.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we are creating experiences for our student athletes to be able to thrive, to be able to develop skills that they'll take beyond the courts and the playing fields when they leave here, and relationships that will last hopefully for a lifetime.
Yeah, and that's a hallmark of Sidwell Friends, right? I mean, you're both alumni. You can speak to the deep friendships that you carry with you, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I want to give a lot of credit to you, Brian, and like the leadership of the school, because, you know, a place like Sidwell Friends, who is known for so many things, can certainly just hold on to traditions that make us feel good. Honestly, like, so when you speak of culture, I think the culture is only allowed to change when the culture above it changes. So I think Sidwell's changed in some really positive ways. Not that it wasn't always great to me, but like, I mean, it continues to evolve. And I always say that culture is very fragile. It's ripping at the threads every day.
Absolutely.
You have to work really hard to like maintain it every day. It has to be that important to you. So for me, just like Logan, I think, you know, I always tell people we don't have a good culture because we win. We win because we have a good culture.
I believe that. Yeah.
And what you said about culture being fragile, I mean, I think, Brian, we've had conversations about this. Where, you know, culture is something that if you're not working on building it and cultivating it daily, then it's eroding. And that it's something that has to constantly be nurtured and fostered, and it evolves with each team. Like each year, that's one of the one of the challenges and also one of the joys about being a coach at this level is that each year you've got players that are graduating, going on to the next chapter, and you've got new players coming in, that are helping to mold that team, and the character and the personality of each team is different.
Right.
But,
sure.
Those fundamental,
compass.
core values and the ethos of the program is something that we can shape. And I think one of the nice things is that our kids get to take that and to mold it into something that is uniquely their own. And that's one of the most rewarding things when you see captains that really take on that mantle. And we talk all the time about, stewardship, right? And, that Quaker principle and how our, to be, Eric always says, if and he teaches the kids, we teach 5-6 tennis together. And so in middle school, we are always working on setting the foundation so that by the time those students get to our varsity level programs, they've already embraced a lot of those values and that culture. But one of the things that we always talk about is if you want, you have to be able to be a servant to be a leader. And if you can't serve and you can't do the little things and you can't run out and pick up balls and hustle to help make the next drill get faster, then you're not in a position where you can have that responsibility to lead the team and the program.
That's a great lesson.
That's a great lesson because for me, I always make the upperclassmen serve. I always feel like the underclassmen, I only want them to learn how to play hard and learn our culture. You know what I mean? But it's your job to serve those guys, and then they'll do it when they get older. I think that's a much better way to do it, to foster culture. And like even with the parents we were talking about earlier, I think one of the mistakes that I talk to my colleagues at other schools, and because we kind of know parents are kind of self-serving by nature, I think the tendency is to kind of like try to push the parents away. And one of the things that I've done is like try to bring the parents in closer.
Right.
And so one of the things I urge them to do is sit behind us when we play, because it'll force you to cheer for us, as opposed to if you're sitting around the gym in your own little silos, you'll only cheer for your kid.
I think that's a great point. And also, I think one of the reasons that our programs have had success is that it really is it's the whole community. And it's not just the students, but when you get the parents, and we have parent meetings at the beginning of every season so that we can set the expectations and the goals and to get the buy-in so that then they are reinforcing what we are teaching the student athletes, then and you're communicating that, and you're staying, each week, keeping them updated on what's going on and what to expect. And they're there behind the bench at the games, or they're there, on the fence at the tennis match, supporting their kids. Then you really have that feeling that it is, we have multiple constituencies, and if you're, we're coaching the students, we're coaching their parents, how to help their students, because we all have the same goal, right? And that's to make the student athlete, the best possible complete person that they can be when they leave Sidwell. And it's important to involve the parents into the lessons we're trying to teach and the skills we're trying to cultivate.
But the whole community, honestly, I think that's one of the advantages, like I always speak about with Logan and I, and you guys having alums back, and I think that because we can speak to what Sidwell really did for us. It gives us some credibility. We got some skin in the game, so to speak. We paid our dues, and I think that, it's one of the things I try to celebrate, not only other teams, but the kids in robotics, and they're doing different, because we're still kind of in our infancy stage when it comes to when one wins, we all win. Because there's so many moving parts at Sidwell.
Right.
I think that we don't often learn. That's one of the things I've learned to do better, Brian, is celebrate. Because I think joy isn't a natural emotion. It really isn't. Because the things that hurt us, when we lose, it hurts more than winning feels good. And so I've tried to balance, what does winning look like, not just on the court, but just when, one of the things that always struck me was that when kids kind of get into college here, especially if it's the college of their choice, and there's no real celebration. It's just more like relief. And I'm like, that's unfair. You've worked so hard.
Right.
And if you didn't get in, you'd be devastated. And then when you do get in, where's the cake?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, the joy is so important. And you both bring that to what you do. And I think there's a way that athletics can bring tremendous joy to the community, just as arts can bring tremendous joy to the community, right? Seeing students perform in real time is a really amazing and moving thing. Seeing kids rise to occasions, seeing kids actually develop character right before you can sometimes be painful, but it's also a beautiful thing to be able to witness.
Oh, absolutely.
That's one of the things that we've talked about also, and getting the students to celebrate and to have that joy in the moment. I think is one of the key things that we can gifts that we can give them
and continue to work on.
And we've one of the things I always talk about is, getting in the arena and just embracing the moment and adapting, adjusting, overcoming whatever's coming at you. Tennis players, when they get to the highest level and they're walking onto Arthur Ashe Stadium at the U.S. Open, there's a quote from Billie Jean King that's on the wall. It's the last thing they see. And it's just pressure is a privilege. And those 3 words, or 4 words, sorry.
That is so interesting.
Means so much. That, you've earned the privilege of being here and having this opportunity to be in the arena. Right. And we were talking the other day about, I forget which team it was, but you were talking about how I think it was NCAA championship game, and the players were coming down, and they were trying to hold the lead and run out the clock. And remind me, which coach was it?
Rick Pitino. Basically telling the kids they were trying to hold on and they started losing the lead. And he said, "You've been preparing your whole life to play this game. Why would you want it to end?" It's going to end, but why would you want it to end?
And it's such a powerful lesson. Because so many times, like you said, it's a relief when you achieve that goal. But you need to enjoy the journey. Because it's been said so many different ways, but the person who enjoys walking is going to go so much farther than the one who's only cares about the destination. And all of us have so much going on in our lives that it's very easy to just kind of get, focused on, okay, I got to get this done and get to the next thing and get to the next thing. And I think we all need to stop, and take a moment and just savor what's happening right now. And that awareness, to be
I try to remind
in the moment.
I try to remind the students all the time, whether it's in 5th and 6th grade, 7th, 8th, high school, just that how incredibly blessed and fortunate we are to be here at Sidwell Friends. Right? And to kind of embrace that though. Don't run from it. It's challenging, it's tough, but we're in a position to be leaders, to be impactful to others, not so much to just be impactful to ourselves. All this stuff that we're doing, this undergirding that the teachers and administrators and coaches are trying to give you is for you to be a servant. Right? And so therefore, in order to be a servant, you have to be equipped. And so that's why I try to remind them that we're blessed to be here. And that this isn't something to frown upon. It's not something to brag about. It's just something to be. It's just something to do. But that we're in an incredible, fortunate position to be here, to be thought of in many ways, but certainly to be thought of as future leaders and impactful people. That's what we're here to help you do.
I'm always struck by the similarities of things that you do, right? So I'll walk out to the court. I'll see you have the kids huddled up and sort of calm, again, centered approach. lots of talk.
Yes.
You too. I mean, I've walked around that track where practice has been going on, and for 30 minutes, you're talking, right? And listening, right? Which is to say that you're teaching.
Right. It's truly a classroom.
Right? And so take us through one of those moments where you're doing it, where you felt like you've had to bring the team together. You gave us insight into one. Maybe you can give us another, Logan, too. But let's do it where not necessarily where the kids are surfacing something that is important, but that you felt that you've had to deliver a message that is especially important. And maybe it's a circumstance where you've left a legacy to that particular team in that moment.
That's a good question. Yeah.
I think one of the things that, a lot of times, I always tell the students that, where, losing is part of the process, right? And it's easy, especially when your program has a lot of success. And some of these students might go through, where they go, weeks or months, they might even have an undefeated season, and they haven't felt that. And, when you do have that loss, it's something where I think it can define you in one way or another. And, I always say, we're not judged by our losses, but we're judged by how we respond to them. Right. And that can set the tone for the rest of, your season, potentially your career.
Yeah.
And, from a team perspective, I'll give you two stories. From a team perspective, I think one of them that we had on the tennis team was early. I think it was my second or third year. And we had a very young team, very talented team who was very confident and, went out in every match and expected to win. And we went down to Richmond. We played collegiate, one of the top, programs down there. And it was everything that could happen. It was one of those Murphy's Law days. Everything could happen, could go wrong, had gone wrong. Right. It rained. We moved from outdoors to indoors. We had to shuffle matches on. We only had 3 courts. The kids warm up. They wait. They go out there and they're playing a tough team that's not giving them anything. And we played college format. We lost the match 5-4. Last match was in a tiebreak. I remember the Kira Morgenstern, who's now
Georgetown,
playing at Georgetown, having a great NCAA career. He was a freshman and he lost that match in a tiebreaker. And I brought that team in, and it was one of those moments where you had 3 freshmen playing 1, 2, and 3 singles in the lineup. And I told them, I said, hey, we lost this match. We're going to have losses, but this can define the season in one of 2 ways. And you can either sit here and feel sorry for yourself, or you can take this and it can motivate you when we come back out to practice, when we get back to campus, and we can work hard and make sure we're that much more prepared to go the rest of the way. That team had another loss later in the year. We played Gilman, lost 4-3 to a really tough team out of Baltimore.
Right.
But they went 14-2. They won a MAC banner. They won a DCSAA banner. And I think that loss at collegiate really galvanized them. But I think the key lesson is taking something positive from the loss and using that to motivate you to come out and work harder, not sitting there and wallowing and feeling bad for yourself, but that resilience, which, we talked about, E's team in those moments of, getting up and being ready to come back out and embrace, what's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a life skill.
Yes.
Right.
It's such a life skill. And Eric, give us some insight into how you think about
probably
this.
What you witnessed walking around the track. I believe in being connected. And so that's why we touch so much. I'm big on, if I see my team, not touching each other, I get worried. So that's why we're always embracing one another in a huddle and touching, locking arms, make sure you're touching somebody. And one of the things I try to do with the guys, Brian, is really get them I say, I can't coach you until I know what you're afraid of. Until I know what you're insecure about, I can't coach you. So we try to rid ourselves of the kind of false bravado that, could come in play, and pridefulness. And that's part of me being transparent about some of my shortcomings and, athletics and my flaws. And I'm trying to get them to be open, and that way we can get to a new place, because I believe that there's greatness inside of all these kids. It manifests itself in different ways. And that's why I always try to tell people, one of my favorite quotes about putting a team together is Lombardi says, I never play the 11 best players. I play the best 11. And so it's like putting a puzzle together. We've had some of my favorite teams have been teams of guys that people didn't think was one of the 12 best players in the school. And so I love the fact that I'm able to teach through connectivity and through them stripping themselves of any ego that may be getting in the way of like their progress. And so I'm like, if I don't know what you're afraid of, then I can't really get you to a new place. And so I just kind of tell the guys that, like, at the end of the day, expectation is a dangerous word, and we try not to use it. I try to say these are all opportunities. And at the end of the day, like, we have a standard of operation, but we don't have expectations. Others may have expectations of us. There's so many people that live vicariously through us, and that's not a bad thing. You should embrace it, because I always tell you, whenever you start feeling too high or too low, especially if you're feeling too low, there's two people your age that would trade places with you, and they're in the hospital or the cemetery. So I'm always reminding them of that. We get to do this. We don't have to do it.
Yeah. That's funny you say that. Somebody, I was on a call with somebody earlier today, and she said, I have to leave a little early because I have to teach. And I said, you mean you get to teach?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's so, right,
Exactly.
it's so rewarding. And
Yeah,
so
the
much
frame
fun,
is so
and
important.
Yeah.
Framing. So I'm big on, like, just using those phrases all the time reminds you, because we're big on gratefulness. It's one of my favorite things. That I'll tell you a story that game at GW 2 years ago when Caleb Williams hits the tap in.
Yeah.
We were down 10 late in the game, hadn't played that well, dominated them early in the year. So I think, we were kind of, once again, expected to win possibly. Most times we're the underdogs. All of a sudden, like, we're the favorite. And the credit to them, they played well. And I remember yelling out to the guys with like 2 minutes to go. I could have talked about strategy, all types of things. I said, 3 times in a row, I said, gratefulness, gratefulness, gratefulness. And all of a sudden they just clicked and started, playing tougher down the stretch to give us an opportunity to win that game. Because we had talked about that word all year.
Yeah. That's really fascinating.
We were talking about Eric's teams because that's not a one-time situation or a fluke, because I've watched and admired the work he's done over the years.
Yeah.
And I came in, they just had a win, I think their first game this year, by 2 points. They won on the last possession over a really strong team. And I just came in and I said, if I had to use one word to describe your teams, it's poised.
Yeah.
Because you can go back 10 years, and see his teams winning close games. And I mean, I'm sure if you went through the record books and looked at, games that were decided by one possession or in the final minute, his record's got to be, 80, 90%. Because time and time again, when it comes down to those moments and you see the chaos on the other side and, people going everywhere, he's got his players. And he's got the focus.
What we're talking about.
And they're embracing that moment. And I think that poise is truly something special. And that's a gift that he's given to his players in this program. Yeah,
I think I wrote with the second state championship, and Logan, I would say this with you. I go back to Al Maguire, who was the commentator for he and Billy Packer, right? They were the color commentators during my time when I was watching college basketball. So this is actually back when Patrick Ewing was at his heyday at Georgetown, right? The great game with Patrick Ewing and UNC, that great championship game, right? Jordan hitting the shot, Freddie Brown throwing the ball to James Worthy, which reminded me a little bit of the game you were just talking about. Yeah. Anyway, but what Al Maguire said about coaches is a great coach puts their team in a position to win. Right?
Yes.
You can only control so much.
Right.
Right? But you put the team in the position to win, and then from there, it's open to all kinds of possibilities, right? Right. Theater. It's a great way to put it. And you both certainly do that. It's a great thing to watch. It's a great thing to watch our athletes develop that kind of poise and character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And, you mentioned, Logan, the success that our student athletes have had going on to college. It's great. They come back to see you.
Yep.
And, Eric, at your games, right, you're always going to see some alumni at the end of the bench.
Yeah, it's speaks volumes to not only our culture, though. I think that speaks volume to the school. I think that oftentimes what happens at schools, Brian, is that even coaches, like we're guilty of wanting them to get all the values that we're given.
Yeah.
They're just not ready.
Yeah.
But when they come back, people appreciate getting for worship.
Right. That's right.
They appreciate all these things that seem cumbersome when they were kids.
Yeah.
And so that's the crowning achievement of the school, not just our programs, to have so many kids come back, be a part of what we're doing, be in the locker room, be on the bench. I go to a ton of games. No other program does that like our school. Yeah. So honestly, that's a credit. I get the chills when I have those kids come back.
Well, it's a beautiful thing to see when they come back to see you, right? It's a beautiful thing to see recently graduated students come back at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Right. To visit. I mean, homecoming, yes, that's a great thing too. But when they come back, when they don't have to, right? When they come back to do something that is meaningful to them, when they come back to seek out someone who's made a difference for them in their lives in some way, that's a beautiful thing and speaks to the power of the relationships that you build. There has been an incredible role that athletics has played at a time when communities have been dispersed, right, by COVID, to bring people back together into community, right? The support that your program has received around this, Tamika's program, right? It's really been remarkable, and I think been, emotionally and spiritually important to the school.
I think that was one of the silver linings of the pandemic was when we came back, there was an appreciation for being together.
Yeah.
That,
we weren't
before 2020, we weren't, it was just like, okay, we're here and we're doing our own thing.
Right.
And, I didn't necessarily feel the same as when we came back. I remember those first on-campus skill development practices that we did in October of 2020.
Those were so important.
Yeah.
And I remember the first day that we had that, it poured.
Yeah.
And tennis is the most weather-sensitive sport.
Yeah.
And normally, any rain and okay, let's clean up the balls and let's go and get indoors. And I was out there with, I think we had 20 or so girls on the courts hitting, and we had just started. We were hitting short court, and it starts raining, and nobody even blinked. And they hit for an hour. And I said, nobody take more than 2 steps.
Right.
Don't change direction. Nobody get hurt. But they just kept hitting straight ahead and just enjoyed hitting tennis balls. And after that practice, there was a rainbow over Zartman House.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it was just one of those moments where you're like, this is special.
Yeah.
And you saw it when we started being able to play and compete and how people came out to the sporting events. And I think just we talked about staying in the moment, like appreciating those moments and saving them because they were taken away from us.
Yeah. Yeah,
and so they had new value.
Yeah, and the athletic department played a really important role during COVID in being able to bring just kids together.
Yeah, getting back and not being a couch, but getting out and doing some exercise.
Yeah,
and that's all it was: getting some fresh air, getting in contact with their
emotionally. It was so
emotionally,
important.
Yeah. I remember that, and that was good for us because I remember at the beginning, because all of us are new and you don't know what's really going on, and initially you're like, man, we got to come back and do this. But then once we did it, I actually look forward to coming. I was like, man, I get to get out of the house too.
Yeah, right.
And give something,
something meaningful.
Get back to teaching something meaningful, 100%.
And I think we also got tougher too.
Yeah.
So I know that because we couldn't be indoors, in close spaces together. I remember, our athletic director at the time, Keith Leventhal, sent out an email to the parents, I believe, that said there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. and we had
That's
kids,
the outdoorsman in Keith.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Bad clothing.
But we had kids out on the tennis courts. I remember brushing snow off the courts and hitting and just – normally tennis is like, okay, once it gets below freezing, we're done.
Yeah,
they were
players say things like that.
Right. Exactly. I like that. There is no bad weather.
That's so fun. Logan, you brought this point up when you were talking about the Billie Jean King slogan, pressure is privilege. Yet it's real.
Yes.
Right? And the more success you have, the more pressure that comes with it, right? That's the privilege of pressure. There's also something about teaching as it relates to athletics that is just extraordinarily public.
Yes.
right? When I was teaching U.S. history, nobody was watching.
Right.
Right? Only the kids.
You had all semester they only come to you when the results come in.
Yeah, and
the
you're
final
right, exactly.
grade.
But athletics, we watch it unfold in real time.
Real time.
Right? You're making decisions in real time. So how do you think about responding to pressure, and how do you think about instilling that resiliency that we've talked about, but also the management of pressure and expectation with the kids?
You talked about like the moments where we bring our teams together.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that in those moments, I think we as coaches strive to prepare them for the arena to perform under pressure. And each night before our players are getting ready for a match, I probably give them the same speech, 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But it's about controlling the controllable.
Yeah.
What you've got to do in the next 24 hours to set yourself up for success tomorrow, because the match doesn't start when you walk on the court.
Yeah.
You've got to do everything you can between now and then to get your homework done early, to get a good night's sleep, to hydrate, to get the proper nutrition, to visualize yourself constructing and winning points on the court in the arena tomorrow, so that you are in a mental space to be prepared to come out here and perform.
That psychological component seems more and more important.
No, it's incredibly important. I think one of the things I do is just remind them, like one of the things we talk about is Navy SEALs says that contrary to popular opinion, you never rise to the occasion. You only sink to the level of your training.
Yeah.
And so I try to remind them, like, we've trained for this.
Yeah.
Like, trust your training.
Yeah.
Like, we've done this already. Like, the pressure you can't do anything about, but just know that we're prepared. Because usually pressure feels more overwhelming if you feel unprepared. That's like taking a test.
Right.
Anything you're doing in class. Like, I remember the days when I wasn't prepared, it felt worse.
Yeah.
The days you felt prepared, you were good.
Yeah, right.
Pressure,
It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense.
Pressure escalates when you're unprepared.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the pressure is the pressure. But other than that, when you feel prepared, you don't see it in the same way. So framing, and I never forget Paul Ghosting, who was just on campus.
Great coach.
Yes.
Player.
And I was talking about, what kind of players does he look for?
Yeah.
And he was telling me a story about Kobe Bryant. And one of the things that Paul himself used to do when he was in corporate America, he said, I would ask a candidate, do you hate to lose or you love to win? And that would be kind of like his deciding factor. And he always wanted to hate to lose people. And he said he saw a video of Kobe saying, a reporter asked him the same question, and Kobe said, neither. And the reporter kind of was incredulous because he was like, it's got to be one or the other.
Yeah, right.
And Kobe goes, I just love to figure it out.
Yeah. That is such a Quaker response too, isn't it? Right. That the binary is not always what we're thinking of. Right. This is, how do we find a third way? Right. How do we find another way? Can we work together to find another way?
That spoke to me because I've always thought I was a hate to lose guy.
Yeah.
And I tried to transform into love to win, because that's that joy and celebration.
Yeah.
And then when Paul said that to me over Thanksgiving break, I was like, that's it right there.
Yeah.
I want to find players that love to play. Like, I don't want the players that, it's inevitable to want things and to have goals, but the biggest thing is, like, do you have a love affair with playing?
Yeah.
Because that's the player who's going to embrace the process, and they're process-oriented, not outcome-oriented.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're not concerned about the end result. They're concerned about the process and the journey and getting there.
Yeah. So let's think just a minute here about legacy. Not that either one of you are going anywhere, okay? But let's think for a minute, if you could, about imagine you're here 10 years from now. What's a note to self that you would like to give, right? So 10 years from now, this thing is going to go into the archives. And 10 years from now, we're going to pull it out and play it back for you. What's a note to self that you would like to dictate about where you hope you will be, let's say, where your program might be, where the school would be 10 years from now?
Remember why you do this. Remember why you wake up every morning and come out here to be on the court. And like Eric said, to be in our classrooms, because the court really is our classroom with
absolutely.
these kids and our opportunity. We've touched on all, the opportunities we have, right? Being grateful for the opportunity to come out and have another day with the student athletes, have a chance to make an impact. And just, whether we're here for 5, 10, 15, however many more years, right? never forgetting how special each day is and staying in that moment and just embracing the joy of having the opportunity to make an impact. Yeah. And, as far as looking at where the programs would be, more so than however many banners get hung on the wall or don't, being able to get the next generation of Sidwell alumni to walk into the world prepared to make a difference, to be leaders, and to be the best possible version of themselves.
Beautiful.
Great answer.
Yeah.
For me, similarly, I think that I would want to be as passionate as I've been about the job and the impact and the opportunities that I have with young people. I would hope our program still exhibited the class, the poise, and the character that it's been showing for the last years I've been here. I would also hope that beyond the impact that I've had on my personal team, just my impact that hopefully I have on the community. Sometimes you never know. You're not seeking that kind of approval, but I hope that all the kids that were here from year 1 to what would be year 25 would have had some memories that they took out into the world that they were in. I was in the building that day this happened. And, Coach Singletary was always this way to me, I would hope that my impact was even greater than the basketball program.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be pigeonholed into that silo, even though that's my space and I love it.
Yeah.
I would hope that, people took away what I take away. I always tell the kids I get to win twice as a coach and as an alum. Get to feel good about the institution that was so good to me and continues to be good to me as an adult. But I would hope that, as my friends that I went to school with that live in New York and all these different places, and they're watching the games on the streaming, and they're so proud.
Yeah,
and
we've got a New York event coming up, by the way, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, they're so proud. And I would hope that, in 10 years, that would continue to be where we put forth a whole community of boys and girls that just feel great about Sidwell Friends in so many capacities. And I hope to have a small part to do with that.
Yeah. Great answers. I really enjoyed the time today. Thank you for making time for it. I think you've heard me say this before, but coaches were such an important impact on me. Had such an important impact on me in my life when I was in high school, and I would have loved to have been coached by both of you. So thank you for what you do for Sidwell Friends. Thank you for what you do for our students. We're very lucky to have you.
Thank you for your leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care, friends.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. No, it's great. Thanks.